I was
Get this price down there, Ho Chi Minh City, whenever you call. I was
It's coming up. Jill says I have to be very quick. Here is the ceramic vase.
Don't drop it.
I will not drop it. We brought it. We made it back from China without breaking it. So.
Gorgeous.
And
What does something like that? What does something like that run? That doesn't feel good to me.
I would say anywhere from 8 to 10. It makes me nervous.
Yeah, why is it tipped?
It's gonna tip over.
a few $1,000s probably.
Oh, that's okay.
It's not going to go anywhere.
Just hold the plate up for Grant. Yeah, take it off that stand.
Oh.
This is that hand-painted plate, and the
From the
Yes.
Yes.
Is the one who did it, and he's been prominent in our relationship with Big Dijon, and he has his own stall at the International Ceramic Fair, so he's an artist of some note. I have no idea what the value of that, but he made that for Door County, and that's important to our relationship, so it's just a really neat piece. And again, this will go with Helen, or we'll make sure it gets over to the ADRC up to her when she wants to carry the stuff back in the ice. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the resolutions. Our first resolution is Resolution 2019-15. I will make the motion to approve it. I'll turn it over to Dan to do our memorandum for Leo.
I'll second.
Our mentor, our friend, and our great public servant.
Resolution number 2019-15, a memorandum, Leo W. Zipper to the Door County Board of Supervisors. Whereas Leo W. Zipper passed away on February 4th, 2019. Whereas Leo E. Zipper served on the County Board of Supervisors for 28 years. He was first elected in April of 1974, served through April 1982, was again elected in April 1994, served through April 2002, and was given again elected in April 2004 and served through his retirement in April 2016. Whereas during his tenure, Supervisor Zipper represented various districts, served on innumerable committees, commissions, boards, held many leadership positions, including multiple terms for a total of 14 years as County Board Chair from April 1978 through April 1982, from April 1996 through April 2002, and from April of 2008 through April 2012. Whereas in addition to Leo W. Zipper served as a State Patrol Officer of the Wisconsin State Patrol for over 33 years, retired in 1993 as a citizen member of the Door County Civil Service Commission from 1988 through 1993, and on the Sevastopol Town Board as chairman for 20 years. Whereas Leo W. Zipper was a creative, dedicated, energetic, and honorable public servant, he demonstrated a commitment to public service and a dedication to the public good. The County of Door greatly benefited from his years of service. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Assembly in regular session this 26th day of February 2019 extend their sincere sympathy to the family of Leo W. Zipper with the acknowledgement of his dedication to the citizens of Door County.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Resolution 2019-16, purchase four-wheel drive tractor. Mr. Ninus.
I move for approval of Resolution 2019-16.
Second.
First of all, let me say this is not new money. This is old money that's been in the budget. It's there. It's brought before the board because it's one item over $100,000, so it's just a formality. It really makes no difference today what we do because it's already been done in our budget. If there's any more questions, I'd try to answer them for somebody.
Any questions? Now we'll go to the voter board.
Yeah.
That was practice. Yeah, you need-
That has passed the vote of 14 yes and 3 absent. Thank you. Door County Sheriff's Department Cold Storage and Evidence Facility Project. Mr. Ostead.
Also move to approve.
Second.
What this is a cold storage. It's in the CIP for the Sheriff's Department. It's for the design of it and the start of the building it. Not to build it, but you get the design and go up for bids and et cetera. Maybe Ken or somebody from the Sheriff's Department explain why it's necessary.
Sure. So when we went through the capital improvement process, we had identified the cold storage as a need. Actually, it was part of the original design of the Justice Center, but at that time it was actually removed just because what I was told is when the building was being done, they had to allocate, I guess, additional funds as far as changes in the Justice Center itself. The reason why why it came forward as a project is obviously right now we have the cold storage that's out at John Miles Park. That facility is really at capacity at most of the times. And again, what's actually stored there is this large pieces of evidence. A lot of times they're vehicles. They could be a boat, anything related to something that's related to a potential accident or a case has to be stored. It was identified in terms of, if you looked at the plan, as a need, and it's actually budgeted further out, but this base, again, when we try to look at our budgets and how we're looking for our allocation and needs, we actually moved it up in terms of the timing and process, and that was approved as part of the budget. Again, what it'll be for is for a cold storage building out at the Justice Center. And it'll be used, again, it'll be designed and then obviously used for anything related to evidence and storage at that facility. The other part of the question that came up, at least through Facilities and Parks, in terms of the timing is what would we use the storage out at John Miles for? And again, if you recall, with the merging of parks and facilities, we're actually, I guess, making that, I guess, the central location for all the equipment and everything related to Facilities and Parks, and that will be used as part of their, I guess, their assets in terms of storage in that building.
Susan.
Just a clarification, I guess, in my mind, I think I know the answer to this, but the public may not. When it says cold storage, the image that you get is a refrigerated unit, and that isn't what this is. It's just something that doesn't need to be heated?
That is correct.
Correct. So in case they're thinking we're building a big refrigerator out there, that's not it.
That is true.
Anybody else? If not, we'll go to the vote. That has passed the vote 18 yes, 0 no, 3 absent. Resolution 2019-18, Lower LaSalle County Park Pavilion Project. Mr. Ostead.
Also move to pass.
Second.
Okay, what this is in the southern part of the county, there's a park called LaSalle County Park that a lot of people don't know exists. And on the lower part of it, they're going to put a pavilion up, and this is just the start of the planning procedure to find out how much to go up for bids and what it's going to look like. So,
Questions? Linda.
Would this be a pavilion that would be available for rent to the public then for parties, wedding
Well, yeah.
receptions or whatever,
Well,
just like
yeah.
at
For
Cape
use.
Point or any of the other parks?
we're used to that, yeah, I would assume it is going to be. Yeah,
Yes, it would be.
definitely. This is the lower part of, I don't bet you, not a whole county board has ever been there, a lot of people. But there's two levels to it, forget the road above it, and then the lower LaSalle road down below. It's right on the water there, it's pretty neat park.
Beautiful.
I've actually been to a few weddings that held there, so.
Anybody else? If not, we'll go to the voter board. Passed by a vote of 19 and 2. Thank you. Resolution 2019-19, acquisition trust parcels, bridge financing, transfer of non-budgeted funds for Wisconsin statutes. Do we have a motion on that?
Also move.
I'll second.
Sure. So Well, Ben, why don't you come up and give an explanation for us? I think you want to go to page 14 of your packet.
Good morning. You may recall this is the property that's adjacent to Door Bluff Headlands County Park. The original resolution came up in December of last year. So the original contract, we entered into a contract to acquire its 72.68 acres. The resolution itself is on page 13, I think, of the packet. And but I'll draw your attention to actually page 14. So the original resolution was to purchase this property without tax levy dollars, but we had talked about the possibility of a bridge loan to close the contract because our contract close date is in March. So on page 14, these are the grant sources that I'm pursuing right now. The ones that are highlighted in, I guess it's more of a tan color, the WCMP and the Friends of Door County Parks, those are funds that are more or less guaranteed and secured. They aren't physically in our hands right now, but they're available. So the other grant programs fall outside of our contract period. So the intent right now is to bridge that gap so that we can close the contract on the March date and then reimburse the funds using a combination of these different grant programs. What I just discovered during our break is I have an email in my inbox that we do have an award from the Raybrook Foundation. I just have to call and find out the details on that one. So that is another secured fund that wasn't secured prior to the meeting this morning.
Great. Questions? Linda?
This has been for consideration since July of last year, I believe, when I look back at the minutes of the Facility and Parks Committees. And the county currently owns 180 acres. So this would be an additional 72 acres. I guess I'm kind of surprised at the appraisal and the price because the estimated fair market value is $301,900. When these parcels were transferred from individuals to the trusts, the Hitting Trusts in 2015, their total value was $390,000. And one of the comments in the minutes said that the 450 was actually much lower than the actual value of the property. So I'm wondering, why did we arrive at the 450? It was appraised by a company outside of Door County, Green Bay outfit. Why are we offering so much more than the estimated fair market value?
Well, I can fill in some of those gaps, and Grant can maybe fill in what I'm missing. So where the original price came, we were in a position to acquire this property about 11 years ago when George Pinney was the director of parks. And at that point in time, the property was appraised for, I think it was almost $1.2 million. So this past August or September is when we had the most recent appraisal done, and that's where the 450,000 number was generated from. The reason that we used Vogel's Buckman is because we operated under the assumption that we would be acquiring this property using grants and donations and other funds like that, and they are a state certified appraiser, so that meets certain requirements that we need to have to pursue the grant funding.
Okay. And then my second question is, the resolution that we did adopt in December of last year, the last paragraph specifically states that the county's acquisition of the property is expressly subject to and contingent upon the availability of donations, gifts, and/or grants sufficient to pay the full purchase price. So if we proceed with this offer, I believe the closing date is like middle of March, which is less than a month away. What happens if we don't get our grants?
Well, on that page 14, the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Funds, that program, I know that program specifically has traditionally allowed us to retroactively go back and reapply for those funds. So if by some chance it's a very competitive year and those funds are not granted, we would have the opportunity to go back again next year and reapply for those. One interesting thing about the Knowles-Nelson program is they have different pots of money within that program. And one program is for acquisition and development of local parks, which you would think would be our natural pool of money that we would apply for, but I'm intending to apply for funds through urban green space acquisition. We're able to make that case because I've had several meetings with the Visitors Bureau, and based upon our transient population and our tourism industry in the county, we qualify under the urban green space pool of money. And that pool of money traditionally does not all get expelled every year. So there's a very strong likelihood that those funds will be secured. The other program that is kind of a major factor in this is the GLRI funding. And in conversations with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the determination of that grant program is dependent upon how we rate within different management program plans. And right now, that property where it is, because of its migratory bird status, touches on 4 out of, I think, 5 of their major plans. So without even making an argument other than where it's located, it touches significantly on those. So I'm very confident that we'll acquire the grant funding for it. If for some unforeseen reason we cannot secure those funds, I do have an offer from the Door County Land Trust to help facilitate any kind of capital campaign or fundraising activity in partnership with our friends of the Door County Park System to recoup anything that we're short. Yes.
Did you start working on grants back in July and August? I mean, if we knew that this was coming down the pipeline?
Yes. A lot of these programs for an acquisition project, you cannot apply for the grants until you have an actual contract to purchase. And we didn't have that until the appraisal had been completed.
John?
I'm sorry, but I guess I didn't understand your answer to Ms. Wade's question. What happens if we don't get the money?
Okay, let me back him up on that one. So here was the plan that we discussed both at Parks, or Facilities and Parks, and then also at Finance. So in essence, we're going to do what we're proposing is to bridge the money. In other words, we'll loan the money to ourselves to actually make the acquisition. We would probably use a window of time through, I guess, November of next year to make sure that we cannot obtain any other grant funds. Again, the Knowles, just want to make sure, the Knowles-Nelson, that one we can apply this year and also next year for grants related to that. So I guess the answer would be is that November of 2020, if we do not have all those funds secured, we could then make a decision point of we could work with the outside organizations to do a fundraising campaign to make up that difference. Or if there's still not interest to raise that money, then you could also come back and say, well, do we sell the property? So, but really what we're looking at is looking at a window of time through November of next year to secure the grant funding necessary to purchase the property.
John?
So you say sell it, and yet, like Ms. Wade says, we're looking at $450,000 appraised value when the other appraisals were only $390. How are we going to sell it for more than appraised value if we don't get the money?
Well, I think there's different things that we're talking about in terms of appraisal. So when you work with an appraisal, that's what they feel the fair market value is versus what potentially, I'm assuming you're looking at tax records
I
or?
looked at the estimated fair market value per the tax records, yes, and also I went to the Department of Revenue to see what the trust had listed it for in 2015.
Correct. So I mean, again, I mean, I guess if you, Grant can maybe back me up on this, but again, usually your assessed value is probably lower than what you'd actually see it being sold on the market, and that's why you always have your houses reappraised or your taxes are adjusted based off your sale value at the time. So again, we're relying on what's a certified appraiser in terms of what we think the value of the property is. So
Dave?
On finance, Linda's particular set of questions was brought up quite a bit, specifically by me, for those reasons. I'm not enthusiastic about purchasing property, but then realizing there's other activities gonna happen in order for us to do that. So that was also my concern, but I'm comfortable with the way we're doing it. I just would like to have more of this upfront information when we have those initial discussions. The timing was clear that we were not going to be able to purchase it in the window of time that we'd be able to acquire the actual monies.
Dan?
Well, I was going to say that this is not the first time that we're going to do this. I don't remember a number of times we've done it before. And we put a lot of faith in George Spinney, and he came through and got it done, and now we're putting the burden bends back.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if push gets to shove a year from now or 2 years from now, we don't get it and we're $50,000 short, we can make a decision then what to do for the money. But I have confidence you're going to get it.
John?
The way I look at it and try to understand it, we have no guarantees that this money's going to come our way. Although I appreciate everybody's thought, wishful thinking, and hoping in the other hand, there still are no guarantees presented on the questions asked by Ms. Waite and pronounced by John Ninus here, and I have to agree with him. We're still hoping for the best and trying to go in a direction. I am not a big fan of taking out of that contingency fund that sits there every time something comes up. We've discussed this before.
You know, one thing to remember in all of this is we have 150,000 of this secured already. And with that email, there's another award that has come in as well. So right now, depending on what that Raybrook amount might be, it's not the entire 450 that is part of this equation. I guess for what it's worth, from my standpoint, I'm 100% confident that I will get the funds for this one way or another. But I guess if anybody needed my opinion of it.
David?
At Finance, Ken, you presented the option that the landowners may be willing to wait until, I believe, July 31st for signing papers for actual sale. Is that correct?
Yeah, at Finance, what we did is we did reach out to see if they'd be willing to extend it.
Yeah.
And at that time, they did say, I think it was July
July 15th.
July
July
15th.
15th.
And if you look at the grant cycles and the award dates, it really doesn't give us any advantage in terms of waiting. So from our standpoint, that's why we're still recommending that we just close on our property and move forward as planned.
The other part of that adjustment to the July date is that then the county absorbed the cost of their 2018 taxes as well, which Grant estimated to be about $830. So, you know, like Ken said, we won't hit those grant deadlines, and instead of billing ourselves an extra $830, that's why we're here today.
But one of those grants then was to be awarded in the GLRI grant that is to be awarded in August. So you'd have a little bit more certainty of receiving that grant by then, perhaps?
I won't know anything more than I would today. I could have the application in, but the award letters don't get sent until sometime in mid-August. That program adjusted a little bit because of the federal government shutdown.
Vinnie?
I guess I would say thank you for having the foresight to see the benefit of this property in the future. As we see with many county parks, that goes on for decades and beyond, of people being able to enjoy that resource. And I look at the acreage and the dollar amount that it costs, and it seems very reasonable to me, considering the use of the public and the use to the public of the property. And your potential funding amount far exceeds $450 if you were to receive the full amount of all these grants, so that makes me feel more comfortable as well. And I think the fact that we'd be approving a bridge loan would let the grantors clearly know that that's not already paid for, because sometimes they look at, if you've already done this, then you're not eligible, but if seeing it as a bridge loan, they would understand that it's not paid for, it's temporarily, made available for this reason. And having done many grant applications myself, I understand that these deadlines don't match what the need is, so I appreciate the flexibility in doing this.
Yeah, and one other comment I'll make on the grants for this acquisition. And when we were in this position 11 years ago, we were dependent upon one grant coming to fruition, and then that grant obviously did not. Right now, as it sits today, we have 5 different potential combinations that will make this acquisition work, that will get to our $450,000. So it's not like a one-shot and we're done kind of opportunity.
And clarify, Ben, please, those 5 options, those 5 possibilities to come up with the funding, and again, we're already partway there, those 5 options don't include the offer from the Door County Land Trust to help us do a capital campaign if we need to, correct?
Correct.
So we
all
got
of those
that
are
on-
just strictly grants. And actually, maybe Jill, will you pull up that graphic? I have it in a slide that's more of a visual representation of the potential sources. And yes, that does not include any capital campaign. So the ones that are highlighted in yellow, those are funds that are secured. You could add the Raybrook into that, because I just found out about that this morning. So, you know, it's one or the other with those GLRI or the Knowles Nelson programs, and both of the administrators of those programs said we would be a priority project in either one of them. So I'm pretty confident about that. From past positions in my career, I have relationships with some of these individuals that administer these programs. So when they tell me, wink, wink, we think you have a good idea, that are good standing, that gives me a lot of confidence. And like I said, the Door County Land Trust, and that is also in your packet too, there's a letter of support from the Land Trust, and where they specifically state they will participate in any fundraising or capital campaign efforts should we need it.
Helen?
I can also add that this acquisition already comes with a very nice, well-manicured trail that has been developed by Camp Zion, and along with maybe working with them, they would continue to put some time and effort into it if they were able to use it. So it already comes with a trail. And I don't know what a trail costs to put in, but I would imagine that is a little bit that you can take off the cost. It's a beautiful piece of property.
Anybody else? Not, we'll go to the voter board.
If I could, this is an item of significance, so it does require a supermajority, so it does require 14 votes. So just want to let everyone know, it does require the 14 votes for it to proceed. Benny has.
I'm sorry, Benny?
So I just one more on that is I also feel confidence with the Door County Land Trust, and their success rate of projects they've done in the county has been very high, if not 100%, in meeting their fundraising goals. So I feel like that's another layer of security in a vote like this, is that beyond the grants coming in, having that commitment from them means a lot. So, thanks.
Great. That's passed, 17 yes, 2 no. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
2019-20, supporting the National Estuarine Research Reserve, NERR designation for Northeast Wisconsin. Do you want to talk about this? Aaron?
Sure. Do you want a motion first, or just talk about it?
Would somebody make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Somebody second it?
People are sleeping.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Helen.
Right.
Okay, in your packet, you'll see the actual resolution is on page 31. We did provide some background information. It continues on page 32, 33, and I guess going on. I guess the most important thing to state right up front, this is not related to the designation of the sanctuary, because I know there was a lot of concern, and that brings up a lot of red flags if it's considered a sanctuary. So this is totally independent and unrelated. So again, we've been working, it's been a project that I actually was involved in when I first started. It's actually originated from UWGB. They have been working for multiple years with NOAA to actually establish a Estuarine Research Reserve designation for this part of the state. And part of the significance is obviously the Bay of Green Bay and all of the habitat that's related to it. especially related to the fishery. If you look in the packet, is one that's been designated. I put down it as example. Again, on Lake Superior, it gives you an idea of some of the work that they do. But again, when you have one of these established, it's an area where, in essence, they will establish a building. And that building is used mainly for anything related to any type of research. They'll have individuals, whether they're students, professors from across the country, that can do grants or certain things related to the university, and they'll come up to this location and actually do the research related to it. So what they're trying to do is they're asking the communities along everywhere from Marinette, all part of the Green Bay, to actually pass resolutions of support to see if we can get this moving forward. And that's why it's here today. I know the city of Sturgeon Bay, I think, had it on their agenda last week in terms of their support, and that's why it is here for you to consider.
Any questions? Bob, sorry.
Just a comment. It's a great opportunity for us to continue to shine. Being part of the Niagara Escarpment, as we all know, the Door Peninsula has some incredibly significant habitat, some of it globally significant, and that includes a lot of our wetlands along both shores of this peninsula. The mouth of the Fox River, where the current city of Green Bay sits, was one of the largest, if not the largest, freshwater estuary on planet Earth. That's a big deal, and we're part of that, and I think anything we can do to help researchers understand our water. We've got a dead zone in Green Bay. We've got fisheries that need help and attention, invasive species that are changing the equation out there. So I think this is a great step forward, and I hope we can bring this to fruition.
Dave?
Just more curiosity of understanding. There's one other inland state that's connected to this. What's the status of Minnesota and Michigan? I mean, they have more space than we do, so connected to the Great Lakes. Trying to understand how we are in the middle of nowhere with this.
Well, I guess the only thing that I do know, well, I guess I don't know the status in terms of what their states have been doing in terms of the lobbying and research related to it. I just know of the work of UWGB in terms of, again, kind of what the supervisor said previously in terms of the significance of the fisheries and the habitat, and why it's a high priority for them to try to push it forward. But I guess I'm not aware of the other activities in Minnesota or I'm sorry, we said Michigan and
Minnesota and Michigan, yeah.
Anybody else?
I mean, and maybe I can just interject. I mean, the St. Louis River flows between Duluth and Superior, so I mean that's included, and maybe it just happens to be on our side of the state line, so to speak. And yeah, I'm not aware what, like you said, what lobbying efforts or where they're at with the state of Michigan. But again, as much as Michigan has a lot of great habitat, the lower bay of Green Bay is considered globally significant fish spawning habitat. So that's incredibly important, and we can be very, very proud of that. We're not just out in the middle of nowhere. I guess that's kind of my point.
Anybody else? Vince?
Yeah, it states that there's no fiscal impact associated with the adoption of this resolution. So they're not at this point asking, they're asking for support, but they're not asking for money?
Correct.
And in the future, could they be coming back and then asking everyone to contribute to this for money?
Usually not. Usually once they establish it, it's actually federally funded. And then what they'll do is they'll actually establish the research facility and then to be staffed, and then also, I guess, the researchers would come in. I mean, in my mind, long-term, the economic impact is actually a positive because you have all that research being done within this area and all the impact related to all that research being provided back to us. So again, we usually don't do that as part of our resolutions. Our resolutions look at what's the fiscal impact towards our tax levy or cost of the county, and there would not be any cost to the county.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Does this give up any kind of control that the state might have on our fisheries or things along the shorelines? We're not losing control over anything, are we?
Nope, and that's one of the things we did research with UWGB, and that's actually one of the things we included the stuff for Lake Superior. So that's, again, entirely, I guess, separate in terms of that. This is more pure research arm of what they would establish. Now, based off the research, could regulations be proposed or changes? Sure, but that's not the purpose of what I guess this part of it would be.
Anybody else?
I'd just like to say that basically, it's really Sturgeon Bay area, that's really Green Bay. There's several sites that are being looked at, but Sturgeon Bay feels it has a really good, is in a good position to be the location for this. And what NOAA is looking for, they're looking for not only a site that they would choose, but also dockage for their boats. So Sturgeon Bay would provide both of those, and I think, we have enough of an economy around it that we would be a good place. So it's basically just a support to go forward with this idea.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, by voice vote. No fiscal impact. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution 2019-21, approval of the 2019 through 2021 collective bargaining agreement, Door County Deputy Sheriff's Association.
Oh, here we go.
Let's get a motion first.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay. Sorry.
You ready? No, that's fine. I was raring to go. We will start on page 41 of the packet, actually, which is the resolution, and actually you can turn to page 42. We have the unenviable task of trying to relay to you what happened during a rather significant period of negotiation. Kind of to go back, we exchanged initial offers in October of 2018. Between then and now, there have been 4 formal collective bargaining sessions and 1 informal work session where the attorney for the bargaining unit was meeting with the bargaining unit and would kind of practice shuttle diplomacy and come up to the 3rd floor and talk to us. And that's how we got to where we are today. With collective bargaining, the way it works is we reach tentative agreements over the course of the bargaining process, and that is what is attached to the resolution. And I'm going to explain these briefly. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions as I'm going, but I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly and just hit on the highlights. It's important to note that the tentative agreements that are attached to the resolution represent changes to what we call in the field the dynamic status quo. Much of the collective bargaining agreement remains unchanged. What I'm presenting to you today are the things that have been tweaked or changed in the collective bargaining agreement through the process of negotiation. The first tentative agreement, again, which starts on page 42 of your packet, arose from the November and December 2018 negotiations. Article 2, probationary period. The only takeaway here is that we have clarified that the probationary period for all employees within this bargaining unit is 12 months. So, no questions. Article 6, seniority. What we have accomplished here is a definition of seniority in the contract that makes sense to both parties. If you know anything about labor unions, seniority is one of the most significant things that are considered across the board, and with a clear definition of seniority, both parties know where to go. There are 2 examples in there, and we often put examples in collective bargaining agreements or tentative agreements, so people looking back 3, 4, 10 years from now can understand what we were trying to get at. So, anybody have any questions about the seniority provision? Going to page 43. Again, seniority for job posting. What we have is a memorandum of understanding, which I will get to later in the packet. One note, you will see there are memorandums of understanding and memorandums of agreement. These are attached to the collective bargaining agreement. They are not yet part of the bargaining agreement. The reasons we do MOAs and MOUs is we're dealing with issues that both parties have concerns about and aren't ready to make the commitment to put it into the body of the collective bargaining agreement. Once it is physically within the 4 corners of the collective bargaining agreement, if you want to make a change, you've got to bargain it out. To bargain something out, you usually have to buy it. So these are issues that we are kind of feeling our way around. And the nice thing about MOAs and MOUs is they actually expire at the end of the collective bargaining agreement, and the parties can choose to include them or not. And it's easier to amend them during the course of the collective bargaining agreement without having to reopen the entire agreement. So that's, if you're wondering why we have MOAs and MOUs. The intent here is to eliminate the prohibition on an otherwise qualified security deputy or security sergeant posting for road deputy, road sergeant, or investigator position. It's the age-old debate that we've had of going from the jail to the road or the road to the jail. We have had parallel tracks. We have had concurrent tracks. We're going back to having more freedom of movement from the jail to the road and from the road to the jail. Article 11, leave of absence. This is purely housekeeping. What we have done is eliminated the administrative committee from the getting notice of the leave, receiving a copy of the medical certificate. For probably decades now, that's been handled internally by the Human Resources Department, and we haven't been taking that to the Oversight Committee. It's just part of the routine collective bargaining agreement administration. So we really are just conforming the collective bargaining agreement to what the practice has been over a number of contracts. Page 44, Wisconsin Retirement System. Those of you that remember Act 10 and Act 32, we had to deal with moving forward from that, two groups of employees. Employees that were employed after Act 10 and 32 went into place, who had to pay the employee share of towards the Wisconsin retirement. Those that were employed prior to Act 32 and Act 10 coming in place, we still had to bargain that. If you recall, the counties, specifically Door County, but municipal employers generally paid at least a portion, if not the entire share of the employee's contribution to the WRS. That was one of the things that the state wanted to remedy with Act 10 and Act 32. And we've now gotten there with this entire bargaining unit where the collective bargaining agreement is going to provide that the employees pay the required employee contribution and the county will pay the required employer contribution. Those are, of course, determined by the state on an annual basis. Insurance. To some extent, this is house cleaning because a lot of this has already taken place. Again, arising from Act 10 and Act 32, the only thing the county is required to bargain is the health care coverage plan premium contribution, which we have set at 15% of the premium. So the employees are contributing 15%. In 2019, they have an avenue, sort of the old way of doing things, through a health risk assessment and a physical examination program to have that employee's premium reduced to 12%. Then in 2020, with this bargaining unit, is they have bought into the county's Go 365 program, Wellness and Rewards, which you're all familiar with from the non-represented employees are going to that for 2020 as well. So what we're trying to do is get this bargaining unit on the same playing field as the non-represented employees with the health insurance premium and the opportunities to reduce that premium through participation either in the wellness and physical exam or moving forward from 2019, the Go 365 program. And this mirrors what we're doing with everybody else. So. Page 45, Article 22. Used to be called a fair share agreement. There was a U.S. Supreme Court case. Janice first asked me that made it abundantly clear until a recent case, which was interpreting that case, shed a little bit less light on it, that we had to have a compliant voluntary payroll deduction authorization form to reduce union dues and fees. So what we have done in the agreement is the only wise thing is said we're going to comply with the law, whatever it is, because it goes to the benefit of both parties. It's not something that we want to screw up. There's a recent case where an employer in Wisconsin was not deducting the dues. The union took them to court. The employer lost and had to reimburse the union for all the dues they should have deducted, and they were not allowed to go back to the employees and seek that. So it's not a big thing, but it's something you want to do correctly. And I think knock on wood, so far, we are doing it correctly, although the U.S. Supreme Court case is going to be subject to interpretation from lower courts, and we'll see how that bears out. But whatever happens, we're just going to comply with the law, so fairly simple. Article 23, Article 33 are purely housekeeping. Clothing allowance, we've not gone back to the Law Enforcement and Judiciary Committee to decide what the uniform should look like for decades. That's been at the discretion of the county and the sheriff, and will continue to be. Again, we're just making the collective bargaining agreement match reality. Same thing with the YMCA. They used to have corporate memberships that the county could take advantage of. They don't do that anymore, so we're taking that out of the contract. And they haven't done it for a number of years. It's just one of those language issues that needs to be resolved. The next thing is the formation of a joint management and union task force. We've had these in the past. The idea being is we're going to work on the thornier issues during the course of the current collective bargaining agreement to see if we can't get an agreement next time around. This collective bargaining agreement, if it's approved by the county and the bargaining unit, will go for 3 years, 2019, 2020, and 2021. During that 3-year period, we have a bulleted outline of subject matters that we've agreed to work on. This is not limiting, it's just what we've agreed to work on. One is the transition from the current traditional sick leave and vacation to a comprehensive paid time off system like we have with the rest of the employees. It's a little bit more challenging with a 24/7, 365-day workforce, but it's not unprecedented. There's other counties that have done this. It's just a matter of working out the details to everybody's satisfaction. The Go 365 program is in that because it's brand new in 2020, and we anticipate we're going to have to address some bugs with it moving forward. Implementation of a post-employment health plan, PEHP, starting in 2020. Also, we're going to explore the possibility of requiring any bargaining unit employee who leaves county employment within 3 years of training to reimburse county for the actual direct cost of such training that gave that employee a portable credential or license. Obviously, what we're concerned about is we train somebody up and they go on the road or they go into jail, and then 6 months later, after we've invested maybe a year in their training and thousands of dollars, that they move on for a better job. They're allowed to do that, but if we can get this into the collective bargaining agreement, they would have to repay the county. Yes, Bob?
Is there any requirement at this time to get reimbursement? Or
No.
There's none? Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, that's a pretty big ask, and we're going to have to bargain that in. The other thing we want to take a look at are physical readiness standards and tests. We have those when people come into the door, but I think as Kelly can attest, not so much thereafter, so it makes sense to the county that we do that on an ongoing basis. We fully understand that the bargaining unit has trepidations with that, and it's something we're going to have to bargain into the contract. And then the last bullet is just any other thing we want to bargain or talk about during the course of the agreement. The nice thing about this is if we keep it up and running and relevant, where we actually have a task force, it actually meets from time to time and discusses these issues, it'll make the bargaining process a little bit simpler. Because what we do now is once every 2 or 3 years we come together and we try to remember all the things that have occurred over the 3 years we want to change, and it's a lot to do in a very short period of time. There's a couple MOAs and MOUs that we'll get into. There's a memorandum of agreement with a canine handler that was initially dated August 31, 2017. And we are amending that. Again, it expired with the current collective bargaining agreement at the end of 2018. Maybe a word on that. When a collective bargaining agreement expires and we don't yet have a negotiated agreement or an agreement that was achieved through interest arbitration, the dynamic status quo continues. So even though the agreement expired in 2018, it continues until a new agreement is in effect. And the reason for that in the public sector is you obviously don't want the sheriff's department going on strike. So they continue the dynamic status quo, and the employer can't say, well, we don't have a collective bargaining agreement, so we're going to do these terrible things to you. So it's just one of those things that allows local units of government to continue operating without the threat of a strike or labor interruptions, and lends certainty to the relationship until we get a new agreement in place. With this, what's going to change, under the old agreement, we had built in a 7.5-hour workday for the canine handler. So 1/2 hour of each 8-hour workday was devoted to taking care of the dog. There's a general consensus by the sheriff and the bargaining unit and those of us on the bargaining committee that it didn't work, that losing that 1/2 hour of time each day of essentially a road deputy wasn't workable. So what we have agreed to do is reimburse or, compensate the canine officer 30 minutes a day, go to a straight 8-hour workday and compensate the canine handler another 1/2 hour at their base rate of pay for dog care activities. That is required by the Fair Labor Standard Act. There are cases and letter opinions on that, because those of you that have an animal, a dog, know that you probably spend at least a 1/2 hour a day taking care of it, feeding it, letting it out, walking it, and that is part of the canine handler's work responsibility. So what we've indicated in here is that's going to be 30 minutes a day, 7 days per week. And that does represent an increase from what we originally talked about in the first resolution, but it's an increase that was born by necessity because, again, cutting the canine work handler's workday by 1/2 an hour just wasn't working out. So I don't know if anybody has questions on that. Moving to page 46. There's a memorandum of agreement, eligibility list, posting and related matters that was dated November 27, 2017 that expired. We intend to extend its terms concurrent with the new collective bargaining agreement, and the amendment of significance is that the road ride-along program and jail shadowing program are each a minimum of 40 hours with no time of year limitation. And what that is when somebody comes in to be qualified for the road or to be qualified for the jail, they have to go through the ride-along or the shadowing program, which they just couple up with an existing deputy and basically work with them for 40 hours as part of their training. So, page 47 through 51 are the actual memorandums of agreement that we discussed. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm not trying to give these short shrifts, but what I talked about with the tentative agreement highlights the changes from last time. So otherwise, aside from extending the term and the changes that I already mentioned, these memorandums of agreements, memorandum of understanding are the same as they were dating back to the prior bargaining agreement. So if you're comfortable with that, then I will fast forward to page 52. And these are the tentative agreements that arose from the January 18th, 2019 negotiation. Article 20 of the collective bargaining agreement, again, this just reflects what the practice has been, is the eligibility for part-time employees to receive benefits on a prorated basis is actually 24 hours, not 20 hours. So that's what we've been operating under. Article 26, which is sort of the most important, is wages, and that's Addendum A, which is on page 53 of your packet, and I'm going to spend some time on this. Addendum A is a compensation schedule, and we managed to achieve what we think are fairly significant changes in this. Understand, this is a give and take. We do quid pro quo bargaining. If you want a nickel from me, you have to give me something back that's, worth approximately a nickel, or we're not going to be able to reach an agreement. But one of our goals going into this negotiation session was to address the wage scale and also to bring our employees' wages in line with what we think the external comparables are. And by and large, we think this does that over the course of the 3-year period. We haven't changed, there are still 3 levels of pay, level F, E, and D, or D, E, and F. And the positions that fall within each level are indicated in Addendum A. What we did do with the wage schedule itself is added a start step. And some of you may be thinking, what did they do? Did they bump up the top end so you have a start step? No. We took step 1 and deducted 2.5%. What you will note is going east and west from the start step to step 1 to step 2, so on and so forth, all the way through step 7, there is a 2.5% difference between each step. So we have a uniform increase across each step. And what we did was created a start step, which in effect lowered the starting wage because we worked off of the existing step 1 and reduced it by 2.5%. The other way you could have done that is taken step 7, added 2.5% to it, and then worked backwards, which would have done nothing but raised step 7. What we also introduced here is the concept of a bonus, much like we do with the non-represented folks. So somebody is at the max, that is at step 7, when we're talking about across-the-board wage increase, is in lieu of a base wage increase, which actually builds your base, they would be entitled to a percentage increase, which would be a bonus each year. What we did under the old collective bargaining agreement, and this is important, and it's getting into almost math-like, which I don't like to do as an attorney, but many of the people, if you were in the wage scale, you weren't at step 7, you would get your 2.5% increase between the steps, and then we would calculate the across-the-board wage increase on top of that. So the net effect is if you were getting a 2.5% increase and there was a 2% across-the-board wage increase, you were getting 4.5%. What we've done in this collective bargaining agreement is that for 2019, all employees are going to receive a minimum base increase of 2% or a bonus. So what we've provided is, again, somebody that's at step 7, they aren't going to get an increase to their base, but they're going to get a bonus equivalent to 2%. Somebody that is between, say, step 3 and 4 is still going to get their 2.5%, but they're not going to get the 2% added on top of that. So hopefully that's clear as mud, but it is an important distinction. And you know, I don't want to say it's the term double dipping because we did this to ourselves. This is something we bargained. But what it will do within the confines of this 3-year agreement is slow down the increases that the bargaining unit employees are going to get over that 3-year period in relation to the CPI. The CPI right now is right around 2.5%. So they're just keeping pace with the CPI. What we hope happens is within these 3 years, and we anticipate would happen because many of our external comparables are settled, is that when we take the snapshot in time in 3 years, we will be closer to where we think we should be in relation to the external comparable counties than we are currently. I don't know if, Ken, you want to add on something?
Nope, we're doing good.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on that? Because in essence, what this represents is a cost of living increase over the 3 years of the contract, probably a little bit less, depending on where you are on the scale. Now, turning back to page 52, we have a memorandum of understanding that I will go through with vacation, floating holidays, comp time, acting pay. This again is a memorandum of understanding we've had in place. We're extending the term and adding a few things that I'll talk about. And there's some other, what I'll call impact bargaining items. There is a part-time security deputy monthly scheduling missive and a Door County Jail shift coverage guidelines. Paired to its essence, what we're doing is allowing the sheriff and the sheriff's department to have more flexibility to use part-time employees to fill overtime positions that previously would have been filled by full-time bargaining unit members. And if you know anything about the contracts, pretty much any time a bargaining unit member fills in for a vacant spot, they're getting paid overtime. So we're giving the sheriff more discretion with a limit on it to use part-time employees to fill those slots, which by necessity then eliminates overtime opportunities for full-time employees. So it's a give and a take, sort of a quality of life thing for the bargaining unit employees, because in some cases they don't necessarily want to work 50, 60 hours a week. But in other cases, from our standpoint, we have part-time employees. We can use that to fill overtime slots, and you're also kind of building your bench because at least some of these part-time employees might be interested in stepping into full-time positions, so you have people that are fully trained, have experience, they can go from part-time to full-time, and you don't have the lag time or the expense related necessarily with training. There is an end to this, I promise. Go to page 54, that's the memorandum of understanding regarding vacation, floating, holiday, compensatory time, acting pay. There's really only two things you have to focus that are different from the last time. We've amended Article 7, vacation, Section 8.02, floating holiday, and Article 30, compensatory time. And what we're requiring now is 48 hours notice by the employee to the county before they use these paid time off, vacation, floating holiday, or compensatory time. Previously, it was 24 hours. That's a fairly short period of time for the sheriff's department to find somebody to fill in. I think the thought is if we have 48 hours, we'll be able to plan a little bit better and maybe be able to get a part-time employee or massage the schedule a little bit to perhaps eliminate or not eliminate, minimize overtime and the accrual of overtime and comp time. The other thing under acting pay is we have addressed a situation where employees, through operational language, through no fault of their own, they're just following the contract. It's one of those unanticipated consequences that when we have somebody designated as an officer in charge, there are circumstances where, they always get step-up pay. And there are circumstances, however, that over a period of time we found where Grant is the officer in charge and who's he's in charge of? Himself. So it didn't make a lot of sense to give Grant step-up pay when he's supervising himself. So we've tried to address that here in the language that there has to be actually somebody supervising. And also, when it's an officer in charge, the step-up pay is 95 cents an hour. When it's a senior road deputy or investigator or senior security deputy stepping up, they will get 65 cents per hour because by virtue of their positions, they're in a position to do a little bit less supervision. So there's a balance. You get a little bit step-up pay to recognize the fact you are in charge, but they don't have the same duties and responsibilities as the person who is a primary officer in charge or secondary officer in charge. Finally, we wanted to address something under 26.05. We have always had field training officers and correction training officers, and what we've added are a category of folks known as instructors. And this is all done at the sheriff's discretion. It only happens if the sheriff agrees that it happens, if they are provided mandated and approved instruction or training, the instructors will also get some bump up. And the reality is, and maybe John can speak to this if anybody has any questions. If I need to get firearms training, there are two options. I can go down to NWTC, I can go down to Fox Valley Tech. You're paying me to drive down there, probably paying somebody to cover my shift, plus paying NWTC or Fox Valley Tech to provide the instruction. If we have somebody in-house who is certified to provide the instruction, we actually do have a range, and they can do it in Door County. It saves us time and it saves us money, and we're just recognizing the fact that we have the capability in-house to train people. What's important from a management side is these instructors are only approved by the sheriff, and the instruction they provide only occurs, and the bump-up pay only occurs when the sheriff says it occurs. So there's a management control on it as well. But it's a win-win. We want to encourage our employees to go out and get training so they can come back and provide training. And again, when that happens, the county overall saves a little bit of money. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I covered a lot of material in a relatively short period of time. I can go through the part-time security deputy monthly scheduling and the Door County jail shift coverage guidelines. Those were basically drafted by the sheriff, and again, the hope is, or the plan is, that we will be able to make use of part-time deputies to fill overtime slots that would otherwise go to full-time employees, and it's less expensive for us to do that. Final thing is the workers' compensation benefits, Article 15. The article just needed to be updated to be in full compliance with the statutes in the code, and with this amendment, it is. So it's something we had to do, and again, the statutes and code change from time to time. We were following those, it just wasn't reflected in the bargaining agreement. Anybody have any questions about anything? Yes.
Yeah, Grant, excuse me for going back, but this is more or less a clarification. Back on page 45.
Okay.
It says in there, and we've had so many deputies that we trained, and then they leave and go to Brown County or some other department. And you're saying reimburse the county for actual direct costs for such training if they leave within 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
This is something the bargaining unit has agreed for you to explore? It's not actually there?
Right, that's part of what we've agreed to discuss as part of this task force.
So if someone leaves right now, before you come up with this thing, you know, if they left today, they wouldn't have to pay us back anything.
Correct.
So, and you're going to, you know, the task force explore this and see where we're at and try to get this in place.
Right.
Okay.
No promises, but we've agreed that it's something we want to negotiate, and I can guarantee you, without spilling any of our negotiation strategy, it's something we're going to have to pay for. But you realize from being in the department, that's the disruption of people leaving is significant and cost us time and cost us money.
Oh, well, we had many Green Bay officers, you know, they got a job at Door County. We spent a whole bunch of money training them, and then Brown County hired them, and they'd say, thank you, Door County, for training these people. And, you know, it cost us a lot of money. So I just wanted a clarification that that's not actually there yet. It's just they're agreeing to let you explore it.
Yeah, it's aspirational.
Okay, thank you.
I should note, because Ken would probably yell at me if I didn't, is we were bound and determined to have 2-year collective bargaining agreements because it's difficult to guess what's going to happen with the CPI, with change the law and everything else. What convinced us, I think, ultimately, what I know convinced us to go to the third year is you look at the increase in 2021, it's 0%. What we've agreed to do is age the plan by 0.5%. That's basically holding steady for 2021 in wages. And again, that'll allow us to catch up with where we think we need to be with the external comparables. And I think what the bargaining unit was looking for there was a certainty of having a third year. Because it does weigh on people's mind, the bargaining unit, and I can say for management, when you only have a 2-year agreement, you're constantly bargaining because if we had a 2-year agreement, we would probably be giving notice before the end of 2019 that we wanted to bargain again for 2021. So you're constantly in this bargaining mode. And I think the fact that we're basically maintaining the status quo with wages in 2021 and have the certainty of a third year convinced the management side and the bargaining unit side to do the third year versus just having a 2-year agreement. Not that you asked, but that was a point of concern with the bargaining team. And you know, I think Dave Engelbert did a very good job representing the county board through the course of the bargaining, and that the bargaining unit deserves kudos because they certainly represented their interests, but at the end of the day, I think we've reached an agreement that meets the needs of both sides, and we've made some incremental improvements. There are still some more to be made, but you can't get everything done at once. It's the nature of collective bargaining. So, thank you.
Laura's got it.
Oh, sorry.
No, thank you. So new process for me. I was on a negotiations committee. I appreciate the work, but that is definitely the lesson learned that this is a time and a process that needs to happen, and that's the nature of it. Just a comment, as for the cost for training, there was numbers thrown out there, and it's anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 that we train these officers that it can cost our county, especially if we train them to get certified and licensed and then leave. So that is a cost, and it's something that going forward definitely as a task force, we really need to look at that. 3 years or 18 months, something of that. And it's common for companies to do that for stipulations, and you pay for that. Also, just a comment, as for page 53, Looking at the 4-year mark, in fall, there was about an $8 difference from what we're paying and what a comparable midpoint from other counties are paying. So to be working for the county is good. And I think that what negotiations and what came out of this and where we're at, it's still very good to be as a position for this, working here. I would be curious to know, though, if the comparable county's midpoint had changed from $23 per hour from what we had in fall, if there was new comparables in the county that came out.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I don't think so.
No, so one of the things that we're talking about is one of the areas where we try to negotiate was, again, with the comparables for the jailer positions. Again, the market start rate is around $23 an hour. And that's one of the things that we were trying to negotiate. But again, that's kind of where we settled on, I guess, the deputy being a deputy, and then trying to, I guess, negotiate what we considered the best wage. And that's where the wage level F came into play, and where you'll see, especially for the 3 years, that's definitely held at the $27 an hour as far as the start. Just trying to maintain that. Again, we're probably well above the average, but again, the way we're structured now, we're not really separating the jail from the road deputies, so that's the difference in how that came together.
And if we went to interest arbitration, the arbitrator would not even consider the wages of somebody of a position that was not represented or was not protected occupation status. So although we know that difference exists, because we are treating all the deputies, road deputy and security deputies the same, we kind of have to do a mishmash of how we get there. But I mean, what's important, and I'm not being preachy, but I think what we've, 22 years here when we've been doing collective bargaining, along the lines of what Laura said, our goal has been we want to have among the best paid employees among our external comparables. We don't want to be above it, but we want to be competitive. We don't want to lose people, so we want to have good benefits and wages. And also we want to have good employees, which I think we do have. So it's constantly a balance to meet the bottom line, particularly the levy limits, but also make sure you're an attractive employer, because in today's employment world, at least for the moment, there are far more jobs than there are employees, and we're basically operating at zero unemployment. So again, I think we've struck a nice balance, and we've made some headway in things that we want to make headway with, and have agreed to negotiate during the term of the agreement on some of the issues that are of importance to both sides. So, John.
Grant, is the bargaining unit aware of everything that we've just outlined here today?
Yes, I mean, I wasn't privy to that, but they have had documents you had since the third week in January.
And they're in agreement with this, or are there any major sticking points?
I have not heard that there's anything that they disagree with. I don't know that they've had the vote yet to ratify, but it's one of those horse and cart things. They may be waiting till the county board says it's okay if you say it's okay. But I don't have any reason to think that there's any issue with any of the language that I've put together.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Linda? Yes, Linda.
On page 53, again, going back to the hourly rates, the compensation schedule, on the bottom there, it said all employees will receive the minimum base or bonus for all 3 years. Mm-hmm. So all employees are going to receive a bonus. Do you have those employees that go above and beyond and earn an additional bonus? Or does everybody get the same?
No, everybody gets the same. The bonus only comes into play for those employees that would be at step 7, where we, much like we do with the non-represented, we don't want to increase their base wage, but on an annual basis, they would just get a cash bonus of, in 2019, 2%, in 2021, 0.5%. Then the employees that are working their way up the steps that go from step 4 to 5 or 5 to 6 would get the 2.5%, but they wouldn't get the 2% on top of that. That's why we have it phrased the way we do.
And that's more clearly indicated in the verbiage as opposed to these charts?
We actually have a 3-year salary chart for each employee,
Yeah.
what they'll make each year.
Mm-hmm.
As part of the appendix.
It doesn't kind of read that way when you look at the charts.
again, we're trying to get is to a place where we are with the non-represented employees, that if you're at max or above max, you're not going to get an increase in your salary base. But if you do what you're supposed to do, you get a cash bonus that doesn't add to your base, at least until, the wage scale catches up with you, so. But as Ken said, yeah, we've plotted, I should say, he plotted out a wage schedule for the 3 years that we've provided to the bargaining unit, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Are you ready to go to the voter board?
I think you should go through that one more time.
We could do it in private.
Faster. I heard it enough.
Are we ready? We're ready.
Boy, it's sluggish today. Come on.
Joe, just look up. Okay, we're gonna have to redo. Okay.
It's Chicago.
Let's see if you change your mind.
Jeez Louise.
That's good.
Well, mine doesn't want to do it this time.
There we go. And that's passing the vote to 18 yes, 3 absent.
You got it right this time.
Thank you. New business, none. Oral committee reports, none. Review
Mr.
committee
Chairman?
minutes. Yes,
Don't we have the annual report on gifts and grants to just mention?
that was in your packet, and there was a link to the, I mentioned that before,
You did, okay, I missed that.
before we went on break.
Okay.
All right, that's it. Review of vouchers, claims, and bills. Announcements, next regular county board meeting is March 26th at 10 a.m. There are Kiwanis legislative days, April 3rd and 4th. If you haven't already contacted our county clerk, please do so no later than Friday. Correct?
Can I make a quick thing on that? Just had a couple people ask me what the initial issues are. What the DC/EDC has put together so far is the school start date. Again, that's something we addressed at the last session. The Premier Resort Area Tax, broadband funding, room tax collection, and there's a potential for funding for the soil and water departments across the state. And also another topic that came up was the Sports Fishing Harbor Assistance Program. So those are the potential items that would be, what would be, I guess, done in terms of the lobby sessions. And then there also would be what they consider agency items. And right now, those haven't been fleshed out, mainly because we're waiting to hear about the governor's budget. But right now, the two things that were on the agency was the scenic route 42, just because they're doing resurfacing, and how they want to address that with signage and also potential improvements for biking, and also then signage on I-41 in Green Bay, as far as being able to say you're going to Door County versus Milwaukee.
The DCECD annual luncheon is April 24th, 12 o'clock at Stone Harbor. We would ask today if you can give us an initial indication if you're thinking of attending, so we know whether to try and block out one table, two tables, a table and a half.
What was that
Show of
date
hands.
again?
Bring the rundown of roll.
What was that date? What?
The Wednesday,
It's April 24th.
Wednesday.
Noon.
Show of hands.
Yeah, show of hands if you.
Everyone's going.
So two. All right.
I mentioned historically, we pick up the tab for the meal, but not at the meal. Correct?
Correct.
Could you say that again?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, all right, okay. Thank you.
Got it?
Got it. Thank you.
Thought it should come from the chairman.
Was that we?
I like you repeating yourself. The meeting per diem code is 226.
Yeah.
326.
Would somebody care to make a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to make that motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone.
Somewhere around 1.